program.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's program, the HR strategy, what it takes to be at the table. I'm Alfred Sanchez. I'm the president and CEO of the Greater Miami Chamber, and it really is a pleasure for me to welcome you today. This is part one of a four-part series that our HR and Professional Development Committee has put together to serve as a resource to small businesses. I mean, I guess if you're a big business, you can use it as well. But really for small businesses to benefit from important HR content that the committee is making available. As an added benefit, the HR professionals who are attending can receive a SHRM credit for every webinar that we're putting on. You're going to have details about that at the end of today's session, so stay tuned for that. Our Chamber's HR and Professional Development Committee is led by two extremely top-level professionals in the HR world. Committee chair is Tammy Davidson, who is the Executive Vice President of Right Management. I think you all know Right Management, a household word. And Vice Chair is Aaron Tandy. He's a partner at Pathman Shermer Tandy LLP. Tammy and Aaron, I really want to thank you. Your leadership has been tremendous. You've been working all year already. We started our year in July and doing a lot of work behind the scenes to get an incredible year lined up in services and webinars and information that's going to go out there. And I really appreciate everything you do. You put together today a very impressive, distinguished panel of experts to talk about today's HR expectations and the HR function, the HR tools available, metrics, ROI development, HR and finance, and what I think is a really intriguing area, getting and remaining at the table. For having been a CEO for a long time that really appreciates the HR function, I know that that's often a hard hill to climb for you all in HR. Before I turn over the mic and the program over to Tammy and Aaron, let me go over the logistics for today. You see that your mics are muted. We want to do the focus on the panel, and you are going to have a chance to use the chat box to interact with one another, to drop any information that you want in there. Keep your eye on that because we often put information and links in that chat box, so make sure that you keep it open and interact with one another. If you do have a question for the panel, there's a Q&A feature. I'm sure you're all aware of it by now. Use that to type your questions in, because unless your questions in the Q&A. It won't be floated up to the panel. And so please use that. Okay, the other thing I wanted to say is that not only is the webinar available to all of us participating this afternoon, but later on today, you can find it, a recording of it, on our website at miamichamber.com. So without any further ado, it's my pleasure to turn over the program to Tammy and Aaron. Thanks again.
Hello, Alfred. Thank you so much. You're always so gracious and such kind words. And Aaron and I just love to serve. And I've been on this committee for many, many years, and I'm honored to be the chairperson of it. And I'm delighted that today we have these three panelists and Pilar to lead them. I can tell you that we're very excited to bring these insights into the HR world. And our mission is to make everybody better, bigger, faster, smarter. And along the way, learn from ourselves and support each other. And yes, in my day job, I am the EVP of Right Management, the household name. Thank you very much, Alfred, for that notice. And I'm excited because I have the best vice chair in the business, Aaron Pandy. And Aaron, go ahead.
Thank you, Tammy. That was very kind. Obviously, Tammy and I want to welcome you on behalf of the HR and Professional Development Committee here at the Greater Miami Chamber. When I'm obviously not helping and supporting Tammy, I'm a lawyer, an employment lawyer at Pathman Shermer Tandy. But the most important thing we hope you get out of this today while you're eating your lunch is valuable knowledge to help you and your companies grow and prosper and make real use of your human resource professionals. As Tammy said and Alfred said, we've established and gathered a panel to talk to you about how you can make sure that your HR personnel are helping in your strategic events, but also to grow your business. So without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to our moderator for today, a co-founder and HR strategic advisor of Proctor Global Management Services, Inc., and a member of our committee, Pilar Proctor. And I turn it over to you, Pilar. Thank you so much. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you very much. Good. Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, Tammy, and thank you, Aaron. I'm a fairly new member of the HR committee in the chamber, so I appreciate the opportunity. I am Pilar Proctor. I am the HR senior advisor for PGMS, and our motto is avoid an HR mess, work with PGMS. And I want to thank our panelists. These gentlemen are very, very approachable. So we do encourage you to look at their bios, reach them out, through LinkedIn. They are available there if you want to establish a connection with them. So let me introduce. First, we have Seth Condoruzis. He is our Chief Human Resources Officer from Butcher Brothers Management. We have Ken Finneran, Vice President of Human Resources from EMED Digital Healthcare. And we have Guillermo Villa, Head of Global Total Rewards from ACI Worldwide. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for dedicating your time and sharing your experience. The topic that we want to address is what we call HR strategy, what it takes to be at the table. How do we learn from your experience? We want to start with maybe a definitional question. And if you can unmute the panelist, there we go. We can unmute everybody. The first question that I have will be a little bit more definitional, just so we all get our head around what do we mean when we say HR strategy. So we will start with Seth. What would you say is your personal definition of today's HR strategist? And at one point in your career, did you have what some of us call the aha moment when we transition from a predominantly administrative to a strategic role in our careers? And how did it make sense to you as it related to the business strategy in your organization? We'll start with Seth and then Ken and then Guillermo.
Yeah, I think the HR strategist is like steering the ship. You got to know where you want to go. It's not just, you know, making sure the boat's moving. It's making sure you know where the boat needs to go, and looking into the future and seeing what needs to happen for the company, whether it be culture, whether it be technology, whatever that may be, rather than the day-to-day operations of the HR. And for me, I was in a bit of a unique position, as I was in a leadership position within the company. I've been with the company for 33 years, so I was basically there when the company started, and I had gone through various different positions and was in a leadership role before I started in HR. So when I took over that position, I had a business leadership role and I had the owner's ears. So I think they really understood how important HR was. And as we grew, you know, HR was more of a day-to-day function type thing. We weren't really thinking strategically. But at the point where they brought me into HR is when we really decided that we needed to think about strategy and know where we wanted to go moving forward.
All right. Ken? You want
Yeah,
to
maybe
add?
just to build off of what Zed said, I think that was a great intro to the idea. And I would say we oftentimes get caught up in the wording around HR and HR business partner, and is that a strategic role? And I would concur with him. Once you move out of that HR coordinator or HR administrative function, it does become more strategic, but that's a shared role between the leadership of the organization and the HR professional. So for me, it was in that progression into the strategic HR business partner or HR manager in my career. That's the time when I was interacting with other managers and executives within the company, taking an active role in finding out what people strategies are going to lead to lasting value and that goes beyond hiring and beyond just the day-to-day administrative pieces that oftentimes these days an HR portal can fill, and really to the activities that can add lasting value through the partnership with whether it's sales leadership, technology leadership, operations leadership, et cetera, in being in those conversations and recognizing that in almost every organization today, and certainly within the small organizations that are part of the Miami-Dade Chamber, the Greater Miami Chamber, it's also those that where you need those people strategies to bring that value to life. And so making sure your HR professional is part of those conversations. And I would say once, if you are an HR business partner, that should be strategic already. To say a strategic HR business partner, I think is a bit redundant. If it's not strategic, then you're probably not a business partner. And then so I challenge both sides, the leadership and the HR folks, to make sure you are adding that strategic value.
Great, thank you. Memo?
They call me Memo. My name is Guillermo, but they call me Memo too.
I know, I called him Memo. We're friends for 20
That's
years.
okay.
Guillermo, sorry.
No, yeah. No, I mean, I just would like to add, you know, to be an HR strategist, first you have to start from the ground. You have to start with the operations. And whoever tells you that you're going to be an HR strategist 100% of the time in HR is lying to you. You always will have to roll up your sleeves, and there's always some kind of operational, administrative work that you will have to deal with. So strategy is very important, and I think it's just knowing the business. Fortunately, in my career, I was able to be a consultant for almost 10 years. And that helped me to try to understand the strategy and what the clients need, and that's what I try to do with the business, with executives, trying to understand is what they are trying to achieve, because sometimes they may tell you, I want to achieve this, and it looks very nice in the operating plan, but then when you start digging a little bit and asking questions, you realize that that they want to achieve that, but they already have something in mind. So it's trying to navigate through all of that, kind of really trying to understand what your business leaders are trying to achieve or they want to do, and then translating that into HR initiatives, programs that are aligned. So you have to align the business strategy with the business strategy.
Yeah, Absolutely. And in some organizations, actually, it requires some organizations to be eligible for a position at a higher level, to actually have an HR manager developmental assignment sometimes, just to connect the dots with that, right? Continuing with that idea, and this will start the question for Ken, then Guillermo, and then Seth. Now that we know what it is, HR strategy, what are the specific expectations today from the HR function? If you can elaborate on some of the specific examples of the competencies that add value as a strategic business partner, and what is the training and development programs that you have developed, that you have today in your organizations or in your career to develop those skills for your HR teams, like business acumen, for example? Ken?
Thank you for that question. I think certainly over the last decade or so, we've seen the expectations of the HR function change dramatically. But especially over the last 3 years, I would say that the COVID era and post-COVID, if you want to speak about that, the role of HR has been elevated for sure. And we've seen some shifts in how HR is referred to, and that echoes some of the developments of HR, from human resources to oftentimes being talked about as people operations or even a people and culture team, highlighting some of the key functional areas and areas of responsibility that are within the broader scope of HR. But you add to that some of the functional areas within the team, such as employee experience or people analytics, which weren't talked about even 5 or 10 years ago to the extent that they are now. And certainly when many of the HR teams are also responsible for DE&I or DEIB efforts, et cetera, there's a lot of things that we are doing now that weren't in place there. So that's on the expectation side. On the development, how have we developed those skills? I think we are still in the learning phase, but we've developed a program, a development program that includes a mix of online learning courses, which can lead to certifications. We encourage team members to get HR certifications as well. We include coaching and mentoring, as well as action projects. Those are some stretch projects, getting them to more of those strategic projects that we were talking about before, making sure that they are reaching out to business leaders, running a project, sharing their results, and then learning from those various elements, all of which are designed to build greater strategic HR and business skills and capabilities. And I think it's that mix of enhancing the HR skills, elevating those, but making sure you're simultaneously enhancing the business acumen so that you can be a true business partner.
Great, thank you. Seth?
I completely agree with what Ken has said. I think, getting certification and taking courses to pass that certification gets a great deal of knowledge towards the HR staff. We've kind of pushed that towards our employees. We also work very closely with mentoring and projects, giving them projects, making them feel like they're a part of the team and that they're contributing. I think gets them very motivated and engaged. So basically all that Ken said, I'm just kind of jumping on everything he said, and
we agree.
Do the same kind of thing here.
Thank you. So we have that the general concept, and we have the expectations of the HR function today. And now we want to touch a little bit, and Ken, you started talking about a little bit about the metrics. How do we measure the effectiveness? And the next 2 questions, or it's a 2-part question, big question. We will start with Guillermo. Let's talk about some of the metrics, some of the return on investment within the limits of an organization's budget. How do we justify the investment of time, energy, people, money, et cetera, to develop an effective HR strategic program? And what are some of the metrics, the KPIs and analytics that you've been able to quantify? In some of those examples, maybe lessons learned effective, or success stories or lessons learned. Sometimes we learn more from that have worked for you in your career or your organization today?
Yeah. Well, I think, measuring people is one of the most difficult things that you can do, especially HR programs, because sometimes you are investing in development of the people, in a training. And when you're asked, show me what is the return of that investment. And the problem is that the return of that investment may vary by company, may vary by employee. So it's very difficult, but this is something that is a challenge for all the HR professionals. And I think sometimes, I divide the metrics in two. HR has to have their own KPIs, which is, the basic things that you need to know how the business is doing, like a dashboard. How are we doing with attrition? How we're doing with how many people are promoting? What is my demographics? Those are the things that, everybody should have. So that's for me, that's not a metric, but it's just the dashboard of how the car is running. But then, I think for me, the important piece is to start anticipating some metrics that are related to the business strategy. So the business strategy is about growth, and let's talk about growth in terms of revenue. Then I think you have to start looking, what are some things or those drivers in HR that are going to help to grow the revenue. And then you start looking at, okay, you say, okay, we're going to grow in revenue. What is the workforce planning in the sales force? Are we going to hire 1, 2, 5 salesperson? How much is going to be the cost of those? And what is the expected revenue? And you start linking the business metric with the HR metric. And you start putting, okay, so for every dollar that this sales force is going to bring you, how much is going to cost me? How much is going to be my expense? And you start putting ratios and you start putting goals that are aligned with the business. And that's the way I would do it. Another thing is that, now you're talking about KPIs, but also you have to talk sometimes about KRIs, which is the key risk indicators. I mean, when I started having issues, and for example, we have one KRI here that we measure, how many people were paying below the first quartile, because that's a risk. I mean, if we continue having it, if there's a percentage that goes above a threshold that we in HR with the business put together, that's a risk. So we start measuring that also. So I think you have to look inside, which is the HR KPIs or the dashboard, but also you have to look at the business strategy. What they are trying to achieve? If it's growth revenue, if it's reduction in expenses, if it's an acquisition, if it is a divestiture, depending on that, you have to start trying to find what are the metrics on HR that are going to help the business to achieve that goal.
Absolutely, absolutely. And go ahead, Ken, if you want to add.
I thought it was brilliant. I love the focus on speaking in business terms. And I think that's a key for the HR professionals. The focus on revenue, profitability. Different organizations focus more, some on revenue, some on profitability, but linking that profitability per FTE as an example, or revenue per FTE is a great way to start. But I think also more and more, you had asked also, Pilar, about some of the what proves out the effectiveness of the HR strategy. And I think especially over the last year or two, it's also looking at the connection and connectivity to the business in a very different way, which is the meaningful connections with team members. And for us, some of our most successful initiatives, somewhat hard to measure, have been, for example, the launch of our learning management system in eMed University, with content geared to the requests from the team, and especially not starting with a bunch of HR and InfoSec courses, but more, what do the team members want that they think is going to elevate their careers and help them in their roles and help the business move forward. It was launching a monthly employee newsletter and a Slack channel for communication that wasn't in place before, enhancing some of those communication to get that moving faster. Once the trust is there, finding channels to make things move even faster. Monthly engagement events. Last night, we had a wonderful Hispanic Heritage Month celebration here, a potluck And you know, that may sound like a silly thing to measure and to make sure are happening, but those meaningful connections go such a long way towards our effectiveness as an organization. Now, when we look at actual scores, our Glassdoor scores, and this we use as a way to look at engagement, similar to the way we look at best places to work surveys, et cetera, to do that. Our Glassdoor score over the last year has risen from a 3.5 to an industry-leading 4.6 on Glassdoor, and we're very proud of that and believe that's a more accurate reflection of the type of organization that we are. But we also look, Guillermo spoke about one of the base numbers that oftentimes HR looks at is turnover, and we do as well as part of our dashboard, but we take an even closer look at what we call regrettable turnover. Yeah. And that's for us, and from a strategic perspective, I would state that that's a much greater or has a more impactful value to look at than just the overall turnover number. We also have a focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging here at all levels of the business. And so we track that and have seen double-digit increases in the percentage of gender diversity that we've been able to bring into our tech organization, in our organization as a whole, at both the employee ranks and the management ranks since the beginning of the year. So those are a couple of other things in addition to the great elements that Guillermo mentioned earlier.
And that certainly sets you up as in the competitive labor market for sure, right? And we all know about Glassdoor. It can be your enemy or it can be your ally. Said.
Yeah, so I agree with what Guillermo said about being very difficult to measure things, especially when it comes to people. But when you can get those measurements, it's probably the easiest way to go to leadership and ownership to show them, you know, the right way to spend money, and that the money that you've already spent was well spent. That way they have trust in you to, you know, spend in the future as well. For us, we're a company that has, you know, our main demographic of employees is 18 to 24-year-olds. So as such, we have a very high turnover rate. Wow. That's kind of what we look to really work on with the metrics to get that number down. You know, our main job is beach attendant, which it's very hot out there. It's, you know, them carrying out chairs and umbrellas. It's a very difficult job, tremendous amount of labor. So no matter what we do, we know we're going to have a high amount of turnover. But if we can measure that and do incremental things to reduce turnover, it makes a huge difference.
Right. Thank you. We're going to skip right now the questions. I want to take on something that was mentioned, continue with the metrics with the next question. Then we're going to stop to have some audience questions and answers, but I want to take this one. And Memo started talking about this. With that having, and this, we start with Zed, and then Ken, and then Guillermo. With that having an accounting or finance background, a lot of HR professionals come from a non-finance, non-accounting background. What are some of the key elements that of an organization's financial information that you want the HR business partner to understand as it relates to the HR strategies alignment to the company's business goals? And I think, man, we started touching on that, but maybe we can elaborate a little bit more with some specific examples. Zed, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely imperative that the HR professional has some financial background in learning. You know, even if they don't have the financial background, that they take some sort of courses to learn basic financial things like being able to read a P&L, being able to read a balance sheet and know what everything means on that. I graduated with the master's program at FIU, and they have a course specifically towards finance to teach the HR professionals graduating from that program, you know, some basics about finance so that you can, you know, seem intelligent, seem to have some business acumen when you're discussing with the CFO or whoever it may be, you know, what the HR necessities are.
Absolutely, speak the business language, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're going to have a quick stop. We want to make this very interactive. So, Leanne, do we have any questions that we want to address?
Yes, I have one here that says, is there a standard why to calculate turnover?
Guillermo, you want to take that one?
Yes. Yeah.
Bim?
Yeah. Well, now, similar to said, also, we have very high turnover. We're a high-tech company. So as you know, there's a scarcity of, technical people everywhere. So we look at also turnover every month. And the way we do it is, we look at the turnover, how many employees have left. We look also a regrettable turnover, just as Ken, because those are the ones that are hurt when they leave. And we do it also, and we do a different analysis. We break it by, different departments, how critical they are. But my advice is that SHRM has the formulas. If you go to the website of SHRM, you don't have to be a member, it's there. And if not, I can send it to the person who has the question. But it's, basically looking at all of your headcount and how many people left you can do it by month. My advice is to do what in HR we call, or in finance you call a rolling 12 month, because sometimes you can have those peaks in 1 month that, you have several employees leaving, but then the next month stabilize. So a 12-month rolling turnover or attrition measurement is more exact. And what you have to do is just keep in track and go back always 12 months backwards. That's the most effective way to track your turnover.
Ken said.
Yeah,
I concur. That's the way we measure it. And I would just say, start at the high level with overall turnover, and then you can get down into the other levels of regrettable versus non-regrettable, measuring by department, et cetera. But at the highest level, it's exactly what Guillermo said.
yeah,
Yeah.
I agree as well. And I think it's important to do exit interviews wherever you can to find out the reasons, why the people are leaving, whether it was, like they said, regrettable turnover, or, like in our business, there's just some people that just can't handle the heat out there and the labor. And,
Literally.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult job, and we understand that. But it's super important to realize your turnover, because if you look at the costs of hiring that new employee, they're tremendous.
Exactly.
So it's not just like, and it's especially, it's gotten better recently, but it was like you lose an employee, it's not so easy to just go out and find the employee to replace them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And just to elaborate on what Sergio mentioned, I think the exit interviews are critical data. Talking about that and the return on investment and metrics, I think if you start putting like the different reasons why people are leaving your company, like in different buckets, like, compensation, growth opportunities, the leader, they cannot stand their boss. If you start putting those in buckets, also you can start reshaping your HR strategy in the way that say, if it's compensation, let's have a deep analysis in compensation. If it's the leadership style, then start looking at, what leaders are the ones that are losing the people. Or if it's growth and development, do we have enough opportunities for people to grow or not? So I think it's very important also to try to gather that piece of data.
Absolutely. And if I can add, there is another measurement that I usually share with my clients, because sometimes it's very easy. Well, let's hire this person, and if it doesn't work out, we'll just get somebody new. And having sometimes that approach, when we bring the idea of every time that you lose an employee, you can quantify that as 2.5 times the annual salary of that person. All of a sudden, they go, what do you mean? And then you can put the numbers with how long does it take to train? How long does it take to the interview? Blah, blah, all of those things that may not be as easily visible for them. It does make a little bit more on that leadership side, especially. Leanne, do we have 2 more questions, please?
Yes, I have from someone anonymous, because most organizations today suffer from high turnover, especially with great resignation. What other ways do you measure retention and attrition to show metrics where overall turnover is not really representative of reality today?
I think that has to do with the attrition measurements as well. I think we addressed that. Maybe the next question.
Okay. What have you put in place for the clerks and administrators to know about your strategy? Because what they do daily is geared toward accomplishing your goals as part of the strategy.
Okay, so it's cascading all the way down to the administrative staff, because we still have to run payroll, we still have to do what Memo was saying. So go ahead, and that said, you want to take that first, and then Ken, and then Guillermo?
I'm sorry, I had a little glitch in the audio.
Okay, sorry. Leanne, do you want to repeat the question?
What have you put in place for the clerks and administrators to know about your strategy? Because what they do daily is geared toward accomplishing your goals as a part of the strategy.
So it's about cascading all the way down to the business, to the strategy, to the administrative side.
We have a weekly meeting within our HR group, and then right after that, we have a weekly meeting between our HR and our operations group. So we basically just let everybody know the direction in which we're going during these meetings, and they're done every week, so that it's not quarterly where things can fall through the cracks or you don't know what's going on right now. We do them every week so that our team knows the direction in which we're heading.
Absolutely. Ken?
Yeah.
Maybe just to briefly touch on the other question that came in as well, and then I will follow up on this. I think, we also look at the number of promotions and advancements over time. I think that goes, other than looking at attrition, how else can you measure? That's a big part of it. The other thing that, as a strategic HR team, we conducted talent reviews with every single executive in the company for her or his functional area or department earlier this year. And that led to or contributed to a more aligned filling of strategic gaps, preparing succession, and addressing any underperformance in a meaningful, objective way. So I think those are a couple things. If you don't want to focus on the attrition side, that you can also look at to get to some of those other measurements. I would generally concur with what was already said on this. I think the big part is speaking early and often. I would say about these expectations. It's something that is, I believe, truly a strategic HR piece, because it's a shared responsibility between HR, the direct managers, and executive leadership. It starts with, if you will, vision, mission, values. It goes into the day-to-day responsibilities, the accountability for those, making sure expectations of the role are clear to team members, and then how that will be measured. What that can then lead to. What do they need to do to get to the next level? All of those are things that we share in partnership with our executive leadership team, but then in particular with the individual's direct managers, in terms of how those expectations are set and what those responsibilities are for even all the way down to the desk level, floor level team members.
Yeah, ideally you want everybody to be able to say, we're making money, we're not making money, and why,
right.
and how, and what are we doing about it? You want everybody in the organization to have that view, right?
As well as a view to how their role contributes to that.
Exactly.
Very much so.
Yeah, and I just want to make a comment on the turnover, because I think the question was interesting, because, and it's true, the attrition rate, or what I say, the rolling 12 months is historic. It's telling you what happened in the past and how to prevent it with a great recession and everything that we're experiencing, trying to find good talent in the market. One of the things that we try to do also is to measure our pipeline of candidates, which is the future, because we know we're going to have, I mean, in our industry, 15% is the average of attrition. We know that we're going to have attritions, and we know that hot skills like cybersecurity, cloud, all of these kind of things in high tech are in high demand. We try to start looking candidates in advance. So we always have a pipeline of future candidates, because we know we're going to have this attrition, and we have a measurement that we have to see how warm they are, because how engage some of the candidates continue, because if they stop answering our emails and they are not engaged with the company, we know that they are not warm anymore, that they are gone, or they should not be in the pipeline of potential candidates. So also that kind of measurement helps you to be prepared for the attrition and the challenge that we have. So that's just another measurement that we use to try to keep candidates in the pipeline.
Absolutely. And you're saying external candidates.
External candidates, yes.
Do we have, and this question is for the three of you, the internal pipeline for as well? Yeah.
Yes, part of the succession plan.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. The next question, and we do have our obligated COVID question, the COVID factor question here. Just for everybody in the audience, when we were putting together this webinar, we recognized that the COVID question is rich enough that we're going to dedicate one webinar just for the evolution of HR pre, during, and post-COVID. But so we're just going to touch the surface right now with this question. And, we all know that before COVID, especially in the small to mid-sized organizations, HR was still making an argument about the value of HR and being at the strategic decision-making table. And then COVID hit, and HR was thrown right in the middle of the crisis. And, one of the first questions that we had is, what do we do? And the answer was, I don't know, but we'll figure it out, right? And figure it out we did. Somehow, HR responded, was very reactive to respond and to touch at the same time every aspect of the employee-employer relationship. We talked about mental health, legal compliance, work environment, medical information, performance management, leadership, productivity, systems, everything, safety. And figure out we did somehow. Those organizations that seem to be more connected between their HR strategy and the business strategy had a better chance to be agile, to respond, to survive, and at times even thrive, right? So with this premise, Ken, how has the HR function changed during this COVID, and how do we continue with this momentum to contribute to be a value-added member in the organization and stay relevant in the business? Ken, and then Guillermo, and then Zed.
So I agree with you. This certainly could fill a whole webinar. So I'll try to
we
be
will.
brief.
We're planning on it. We already have some more questions for that. Yes.
Yeah, it started with, how do you switch to a fully remote environment, a forced fully remote environment with companies who, many of which were woefully unprepared to do so, and HR being thrust into the midst of that. At the same time that we experienced a shared global trauma event, and for the first time ever, when you think about what trauma is and the lasting effects that has on employees, families, etc., it then thrust HR to the forefront again. Later, it was, how do you come back into the office in full or in hybrid or staying remote?
And I don't
How do
want
you ensure productivity and connection via Zoom? How do you train leaders to manage in a remote environment, many of which weren't trained to do so, and in many cases still aren't very effective at that? How do you prepare a safe home work environment or a safe work environment upon the return? I know these are just how-to questions, but it's things that every HR leader was addressing and needed to address during the pandemic. How do you deal with sickness? How do you deal with accommodations, family issues? And then coming back in the midst of an environment where the job market was one of the toughest job markets and most competitive we'd ever seen. I've worked in the tech industry for the last 5 years, and the tech industry has had full employment, more than full employment, actually, for the better part of the last 10 years almost. And so then you're trying to hire in a hyper competitive market. How are you developing team members in person and remotely? How are you driving culture and innovation when everyone is not physically present, which is what most of us were used to? How were you actively partnering with business executives through Zoom, which was a newly learned skill? As well as always trying to still measure and prove that the HR initiatives and programs that you're introducing are adding value. And then I think now coming back in many cases, it's coming back to saying, how are you showing that the talent and culture initiatives, as well as the due diligence during M&A processes, are adding value? So I know it's a lot of how-to questions that I've just thrown out. I think there's a lot of strategies around there, but I think the reason I phrased it that way is that it has unquestionably thrust and elevated the HR professionals and that strategic HR professional to the forefront of organizations. And not only in small and mid-sized businesses, businesses of all sizes are realizing.
Oops.
We lost Ken.
Yeah.
So Guillermo, you want to continue and we'll.
Yeah, well, just continuing on what Ken was saying, I think HR now has a unique opportunity. I think during the pandemic, I think the function, I think, was more visible for leaders and for the employees. They realize, what HR can do in a crisis like the one that we lived during the pandemic. And also, I think in most organizations, depending how the pandemic was handled, I think in at least the last two organizations that I have been working with, they value more. They really have a value for HR. They understand the value that they can bring to just to continue their operation under the circumstances that we all have lived. So I think, just to continue to be relevant, and I think, I think we have to take advantage of that opportunity, and COVID and the post-pandemic life is changing, is reshaping the employment deal, why employees come to work for you, and why you want employees to come to work. And I think, we have to now to navigate and continue trying to add value by having the right work arrangements that your business needs to operate, to continue to having collaboration, to continue to be innovative. I think we have the challenge with inflation and the glooming recession that everybody's talking about. Right. I think we have a lot to add in terms of value with cost management and helping the business to achieve their goals, managing in a responsible way all the staff expenses that we have and all the programs that we have in HR. And I think performance is going to be more important. How we measure the performance now with employees working remotely, hybrid, or in a special work arrangement. And so I think, I think there are a lot of opportunities. I see the post-COVID era as an opportunity for HR to continue adding value to the business and to the leaders and the employees.
Continuing the momentum and not send back to that. Okay, Seth, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we were in a little bit of a different position than Guillermo and Ken, in that almost all of our employees couldn't work remotely. You can't rent a beach chair from home. So,
I mean, you could, but what do you do with it?
Yeah,
you could, but what do you do?
Unfortunately, we had to lay off like 900 of our 1,000 employees.
Oh my God!
Wow.
So we fortunately were able to bring all of them back that wanted to come back, but the beaches were closed for almost 2 months. So we had no business for 2 months, and it made it very difficult. And in laying off those 900 people, we wanted to take more of a personal approach and not just everybody get an email, sorry, you've been laid off. We want to take more of a personal approach and let everybody know exactly what was going on, and have our leaders reach out to the individuals directly and let them know, what our plans were and how we planned on bringing everybody back. And then, bringing back 900 employees is no easy task as well.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
I can only imagine that.
Especially in those type of positions where, sometimes you don't hear from people. And so we probably brought back about close to 750, 800 of the 900 of our our
Okay.
previous employees. So
Amazing.
we did a great job there. We were able to fill the other positions, but it was a tremendous task. And I would say for having, after we bring them back, having 1,000 employees and doing all the COVID tracing that we were required, that was a tremendous task as well.
Wow.
So I think it's just the most important thing that I've learned is just to be flexible and be able to know that, you know, be prepared for anything. I think that
Yeah.
was the kind of thing where nobody's ever gone through anything like that. So
Nothing like
just
that.
try to be prepared for anything that can happen and just pivot accordingly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was almost like the HR function did pass the test of fire, right? But even with that, we were still, or we reacted, we responded. So one of my last questions, and we will start with Guillermo. Even during the entire COVID situation, we reacted, we responded. But how do we, as an HR professional, remain at the strategic decision-making table from the previously reactive role to become an active and even proactive participant in the business? You know, we all have the stories that HR learns about a business decision that, you know, by tomorrow we need to hire 5 more people because we're opening operations in New York.
Mhm.
And we're all behind the business, behind the decision, chasing that decision. And many times, so what do you mean 5 people? And you know, sometimes the expectation is, can you have the candidates by tomorrow? Because, you know,
No.
how do we do that? And one of my last, second to last question, Guillermo.
Well, I
active
think-
versus
Yeah, reactive versus active. I think, well, first thing is to really understand the business. I mean, to be very aware where the business is heading, what is the strategy, what is the operating plan for the next 2 or 3 years. I mean, if you and HR don't know that, then it's very little that you can be proactive. So you have to understand what is going to be the plan for the next 2, 3 years. And with that, you know, become a trusted advisor. I think we already have shown that we can respond with agility, that we can be innovative. I mean, that's what we have been shown during this post-pandemic, and that we can bring options and alternatives to the leaders to achieve their business goals. But again, I think, you know, going back to what we were talking before, I think it's critical to have that business acumen, that you understand your own business, your industry, what are some of the trends, so you can be more proactive and bring, you know, ideas to the table of what we should be doing now that will help you to achieve your goals in 2 or 3 years.
absolutely. Said, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think to add to that, it's important to make leadership know exactly what the HR function is and what's needed in HR, so that they can allow you to be proactive and not reactive, and not say, hey, I need 5 employees tomorrow.
Exactly.
You know, in our business, we take on a tremendous amount of new contracts each year, and they know that it takes us time to get the employees, and typically, you know, they give us that time to get employees and to get, you know, all the other HR functions set up for that property. As well, they just understand that, you know, they need to give us some time in order to be proactive. But that being said, there are times when you have to be reactive. There's obviously nobody could have predicted the COVID, and unfortunately we had to be reactive. There are times with our business where, because of circumstances outside of our control, they say, hey, we're going to open a new property in 3 days. I need you to hire me 20 employees. And that's happened before, and fortunately, we're able to shift people around throughout the company to get things taken care of. But it's basically just knowing that be proactive when you can be, and be reactive when you have to be, and be able to just make sure you get the job done.
Absolutely, and that's a great advice. Ken, anything that you want to add, and then we're going to wrap it up.
The only thing I would add, and I thought those were great advices shared by both the gentlemen, is to constantly be taking a look at the tools and systems you're using. I think that flexibility and adaptability that you spoke about early on this webinar, Pilar, is critical, but it's also not only relying on what I'll call the tried and true HR practices, most of which were developed 70 years ago or so. And yet looking for new ways and questioning, is this still the best way to either assess, develop, et cetera, the modern workforce, and to partner with strategically with the executives to add the most value. And in doing so, that's allowed us to change a number of those and the ways that we've done things, to move away from some of the things that have been used for many, many years, but may not be as effective anymore.
Right. And it could be as simple as asking the operations. I remember early in my career, one of my mentors said, just ask to be invited to the IT meeting, to the operation meeting, to the sales. And I just want to be a fly in the wall. I may not understand half of what you say, but I may understand half of what you're saying. And little by little, if we are at the early stages in our career, we can learn a little bit more about the business every time. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm looking at the time and I want to be respectful to everybody. Maybe one more question, Leanne, and then Tammy, we can have some closing remarks.
Okay, last question is, with concerns of a recession looming, this will be the first one in my professional career. What strategic steps can be taken now to prepare?
Who wants to take that one? The recession is coming. What do we do? The recession is here.
It's here. Yeah,
It's here.
it's already here.
I would just say figure out, what things from your budget can be cut, because probably you're going to have a lower budget moving forward than you've had, and just proactively try to figure out what things do I need and what things can I get by without.
Yeah.
Ken?
Very much what was just shared. This is the time to be proactive. This is not a reactive state. We know that it's looming, that it's here in already. And so this is to look at where can we, in many cases, save money. And if that is going to have an impact on your overall employee base, start looking at that and start reviewing that with senior leaders now.
Yep.
Getting ahead of that and asking what would a 10% reduction look like, 20 or 30%, because we don't know the severity of this recession and how would we go about that. And then certainly taking a look at any discretionary spend, again, tools, systems, et cetera, in driving out any waste, but also putting some of those decisions on hold if it's not absolutely necessary.
Great. Guillermo?
Yeah, no, the same. It's got to be priorities, expense management, and I think transparency. I think you have to be transparent with employees. I think it's very important that the leadership talks like to a family. We have to tighten the belt. Yeah. Tough times are coming, and so this is what we can do, and this is what we cannot do for you as an employee. So I think transparency is going to be critical also.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. The last question was all about giving advice to the HR professional, but I think we'll summarize with all of this advice to everybody. Thank you so much. And Tammy, we can have some closing remarks.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes. And before I do the closing remarks, I'll add my 2 cents in on that last question. What can you do professionally in your job? Yes. But what can you do professionally for your career? It's called network. Be active. Join these wonderful webinars and get active with people that you know. You will not only gain knowledge through these things, but also bolster each other up. I do this constantly. I'm a student of many people, and I ask questions and I learn from them. And then I give back and learn, and hopefully they'll learn from me too, what little that I can contribute to them, but I appreciate that. What a tremendous hour we've had. It has been phenomenal. It flew by. I'd like to thank Guillermo, Zed, and Ken and Pilar for their attention to detail, their wonderful advice, their thoughts and insights on what we do. I'd also like to thank the chamber here. Leanne, couldn't do this without you. And Tanya and Christina and Alfred, we appreciate you. Aaron and I are your soldiers out here for the HR committee. I'll set a reminder for everyone here. The next one is on the 8th. And I'll tease you, we're going to have Ryder, Amerijet, and our dear friends from a hospital group. And we're going to talk about the next part of this, and maybe even go into a little bit of this, how are we going to do this recession? What's our strategy? Now what? What are we going to do? So we want you to be a part of that. And if you are not, I'll make a shameless plug right now. If you are not a member of our HR committee with the chamber, please reach out to me personally. Reach out to Aaron personally. Answer your email to Leanne and get involved, because it is a wonderful, wonderful ground of senior executives and HR leaders and those that want to aspire to grow. So thank you again for your time, and have a blessed afternoon.